Wow, I mean, they're called lightning talks for a reason, aren't they? That's amazing. Thanks very much to Sam, thanks to Rosie, and thanks to Nourhan as well. Brilliant, really inspiring. 15 minutes, I feel like I've done a tiny little degree. Great, so we've got time for more questions. Hashtag Ignition GM, hashtag Slido. Michael, do we have, would you like to join us? Yeah, come on up, come on down, as they used to say on a very old quiz show. Great, thank you. And I think Michael might need a mic as well, just so we can hear the question. Brilliant, thank you very much indeed.
The first question from the virtual audience is, what were the biggest barriers to building and harnessing community interest?
Lovely, and do we have a name?
Anonymous. So
Anonymous. Ooh.
If people online could put their name and their organisation.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you very much. So, person of mystery asks. Who'd like to take that?
Yes, shall I go for it?
Lovely. Thanks,
I think to begin with, it was so helpful establishing the baseline because we knew where to start the conversations with people, and those conversations start in so many different places. So we really had to be flexible with where we did start those conversations with people. So maybe it was like people cared about health and well-being or wildlife, and it's how do you then navigate that conversation to then talking about climate resilience and things like how plants can cool down urban areas. That maybe doesn't seem that exciting always, but actually those are essential things that are also connected to health and well-being and that sort of thing, like Matt talked about earlier. So I think, yeah, for us, it's navigating those conversations and working out what people care about most.
And what did you find was there a common spark where you could see people thinking, okay, now I get it?
Not overly, to be honest with you. I think it's the passion that people have for their communities and where they live. So yes, I suppose that is exactly that. And wanted to make a change. I think in the last year, the coverage on climate change in COP has been really helpful, and we saw the appetite. So many schools signed up to programmes. So many people wanted to be involved in the conversation. I do think that really helped us to connect what we're doing with the bigger picture there as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Question from the room, please. Oh, don't be shy. Thank you, sir. May we ask? No, brilliant. A lovely last question. And may we ask who you are and where you're from as well, please?
I'm about to start at the RHS in the community engagement team, so it may be a bit of an unfair question on Rosie, but I'll give it a go anyway, and she might not like me from there on in. But in terms of the relevancy of nature-based solutions and climate resilience in kind of neighbourhoods where there's 68,000 terraced houses and it's mostly there's a lot of social landlords. Does that resonate to the community? Do they is it an issue with them, or there's issues around littering? There's issues about food poverty. Where does it rank in terms of does it resonate with them is kind of the question.
Good question. Who'd like to take that?
I'll take that question.
Thank you. You're doing an excellent job there, Rosie.
I think it's about, again, starting their conversation with them and the things that they care about. Yeah. Green spaces became so important as in COVID, so that also changed the narrative as well. And that's helped us to talk about how they're used and the importance to local communities, and for people to actually engage in their local community rather than maybe going further afield. So once you start the conversation, it's very quickly clear that yes, it's a really high priority, but I suppose it depends on being able to get them from that thing about littering, which is super important, to that connection to green spaces as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
If I may add to that as well, from a university point of view, we could see a lot of interest from different groups as well. So we've had a lot of interest from the students, we've had a lot of interest from lecturers. So we've had MBS becoming the most important thing to add to the new curriculum for the year, for example. So we've had lectures adding that to architecture programs, adding that to planning and so on. And on the business side as well, we've had different companies and developers coming to us for consultancy, making sure that they want to see firsthand what's happening at the Living Lab and making sure that they want to integrate that within their work as well. So that was another sort of group that we've been working with at the university and with other partners on the project as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Another question from our virtual audience, please, Michael. Sorry. You'll have done a mini marathon by the end of it.
So a question from the online audience is, are we at a place where we can scale up delivery of MBS? And in particular, what can local authorities do as they're a key stakeholder for the project?
Great. Sam, would you like to give that a go?
Try and answer this one. So this is basically the whole Ignition project is scaling up delivery of MBS, and as Matt laid out, our very ambitious plan starting with 3,000 sites at the start of the project has now run down to 16, and that process, we can now take the learnings from that to build a larger pipeline of projects, but we've done the legwork on that, so I think we're partway there on the scalability, and everything we've done within the project, aside from the business models, helps to support that. So they're taking people to the Living Lab, understand how you can connect MBS. So that's the unique thing about the Living Lab, is that it's all connected for a greater sum of its parts. So it can manage more water because it's connected, and it can support more plants because it's connected. So yeah, hopefully the Ignition project will help with this scalability of MBS, and yeah.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Because there is, at a national level, national policymakers want a solution that they can kind of fit onto everything because it's a lot easier. But actually, the way to get to net zero is going to be rather like life, very different. There's going to be lots of paths, lots of ways of doing it. Some will be more difficult than others, and some will be a bit messy. But it's, you've obviously, with the project, you're knitting together those lots of different streams of how to get there in a really consistent way, and that talking across sectors, I think, is really powerful. Nourhan.
I wanted to add to that as well. During the development of the Living Lab, and specifically during the start of the construction, it was quite challenging to get, for example, planning agreements and making sure that we can go ahead with the construction. So that was something that pushed forward the council itself to look into the policies and make sure that maybe it should be easier for the next project on the pipeline. So through the Living Lab, not only we have learned through the development process and making sure that it's on ground, we started to see small things that came across, and then we can start to scale it up through other projects that come around. So that was something as well.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got to have a gentleman over there. Thank you. Our final question for this morning's session.
It's a question for Nourhan.
Sorry, maybe
yeah, it's Pete Stringer from City of Trees. It's not a tree-related question, so that's the first.
Sorry.
Nourhan, the whole project at Salford University was amazing and really demonstrates how you can achieve a retrofit in some relatively, not modern buildings that have been, put up in the last 30 or so years. And I think what really needs to come out, I think, for the audience and for the virtual audience is to understand some of those technical constraints and barriers that you faced. And in particular, I'm thinking about the green roof and the green wall, not the trees, but those two elements, because those are the sorts of things that Matt mentioned earlier on in terms of vertical spaces that we can really achieve something. So it'd be useful, maybe with your sort of hindsight now, to highlight those barriers and those concerns and how you overcame them.
Thank you so much, Pete, for that, because 5 minutes definitely did not give justice to the work done there.
2 more. So,
so actually, with each part of the Living Lab, we had a different constraint, as Pete mentioned, because Pete was actually consulting on the design as well, and that was part of the co-design process. We made sure that we had the perspective of different stakeholders and different partners on the project, and that has made a key difference on the progress of the design. Specifically for the wall, there was the element of weight, specifically for the 16-meter high green wall. And the idea was to make sure that we had minimum minimal input or minimal effect on the building next to it, and making sure that we don't affect the settlement of the building. So that was something that is not related to MBS, but rather structurally. And we had to work around that by taking out some of the, so I don't want to go into details about it. Hopefully, if you've attended the tour yesterday, you've seen that. But we have taken out some soil and made sure that we had a foundation brought in that would balance the total loading for the green wall. So long story short, we worked around it with a retrofit structural solution. Similarly, for the green roof, for example, the green roof was not a very heavy carrying structure. So we had to work around that with the structure of the building itself. So made sure that all the heavy elements are capitalizing on the design of the building itself. So we could not have added the green roof without looking into all the background infrastructure of the building, making sure that we had a structural engineer with us, making sure that we had, making sure, for example, that the type of tree was selected not to grow too much because it's on the roof, so it has a limitation for the weight. And similarly for all the different parts, even for the trees, for example, because the trees were developed under, over the main broad of the university, the Broadwalk, which had all the infrastructure going underneath. So basically, we could not excavate not even half a meter. So we had to work around that, and we added the such trees fully overground, and we created a very nice, aesthetically pleasing place where students and staff can sit. So the challenges with retrofitting actually turned into opportunities. It was challenging to go through it, but the bespoke design that came out at the end was quite more than what we imagined, actually.
Well, if ever there was a way to sum up this morning, which is the challenges are there, but the opportunities, I'm sorry, sir, we're completely out of time, but I know our speakers will be here over lunch if you'd like to ask a question. I think that's just a beautiful way of summing it up. You know, the challenges are there, but so are the